Welcome to the Mindset Matters, the podcast where psychiatry, medicine, and real human experiences collide, all through the eyes of two psychiatric PAs.
We're your hosts, PA Mercedes Dodge and PA Jessica Spissinger, two passionate psych PAs on a mission to bridge the gap in mental health care.
So whether you're a provider just here to level up your psychiatric insight, increase your mental health skills, you're in the right place.
Each episode, we shine a light on the incredible work PAs are doing in psychiatry and beyond. Our goal is to build a community focused on better patient care, professional growth, and personal well-being.
This podcast, a little disclaimer, is for educational purposes only. We're not here offering medical advice, psychiatric advice. If you or someone you know needs support, please reach out to a licensed mental health professional. All right, guys, let's dive in.
I'd love to start because you did share that you have an undergraduate degree from a liberal arts school in, I think, both performing arts and philosophy. And you feel like there's a connected thread. So why don't you take us on that journey?
Sure. I graduated from liberal arts school in Illinois called Shimer College. My undergrad degrees focused on performing arts and philosophy. I think most young teenagers and early 20-somethings, we're not quite sure what we want to do with our lives. I was fascinated by performing arts. I have an aunt, a Nietzsche scholar in New York, and is almost retired. They're still holding on to her. It interested me, the thoughts of the big questions. Philosophy is really all about the big questions, the nature of truth, how we determine reality and subjective nature, Plato and Aristotle, and how we think about the mind. The other side of that exploration is performing arts and how we talk about people, how we express things to people, how we convince people of things, right? Not in a lying way, but in a, how do we believe ourselves, the story that we're trying to sell, right? Whether or not that's based on our own experiences or somebody else's experiences. And then, of course, we come into psychiatry, which is kind of an iterative process of how we're talking to another person, right? Ultimately, we need to make sure to convey to them that they can trust us. We're in this situation where we want to talk about what's important to them, right? And that is really kind of a core belief system, right? How do we talk to people when we do performing arts, when we talk about conveying a character? How do we portray it in a way that helps people see it in their own lives, right? And that's certainly in philosophy. What kind of questions are we asking? Why is that question important? In psychiatry, it's, why are you here, right? I mean, I always joke with people that I don't have any secret information on your life, right? I certainly don't have the information on what's going to work for you, right? I mean, I can quote you studies and I can talk about the DSM and I can give you criteria and timing and severity, but that's not particularly helpful, right? What I'm trying to do is core knowledge, apply that to issues that are important to you, right? Apply that to issues that you care about, that you came in the door for. And I think that obviously when you're dealing with really severe mental illness, when you're dealing with people in hospitals, sometimes you need to get them to a point where they can make an adequate informed decision. The majority of people we see, maybe outside of the hospital setting, the majority of people we're seeing, even if they've been hospitalized several times before, they're making an informed decision about what they're struggling with, that they're not happy with what they're dealing with, right? I mean, like, oh my God, I've been hospitalized 3 times, or I keep on having these episodes that really interfere with my ability to hold down a job or a relationship, or to deal with the frustrations with my son or daughter or whatever, right? I think those are the meaningful questions. And ultimately, they're the connective thread between all things. I started in family medicine and did some urgent care, but most of it was in family med. And that is interesting too, because we're trying to figure out what is going to help people on a general sense, right? The holistic look at all the stuff that's going on. And then we're trying to, best family medicine is coordination of care. We'll send you to the orthopedist, we'll send you to the cardiologist, we'll send you to the neurologist, we'll send you to the psychiatrist, right? Ultimately, the secret sauce of family medicine is making sure that all those parts are working together and that we're focusing on what's going to help the person live the longest, right? Not what's going to create the best billing or the number of visits or how many surgeries you can accomplish in the space of 85 years. Who cares about any of those things if we're not living a better life? And I think that ultimately, of course, that's what psychiatry is. That's what philosophy is. That's why we ask any of these questions. And so to me, I think as I look back, and maybe that's a retrospective narrative that I've created for myself, but as I look back on those are important, right? Those are the big questions. And I love to do that. And that fills me with passion and obviously keeps me going to my job. So
I see how much you're background and your experience makes you an excellent listener. Because I talk to my patients about, I'm trying to understand in your shoes. And that's a common thread that I say every day. I said it today. And the way that how you interacted, or what you mentioned about performing arts and philosophy, there is a merge. You're trying to get that trusted alliance under a limited amount of time and provide guidance without telling them this is the only option. You're trying to find the inner growth and exploration from them, not from what you dictate as a medical provider. I just love how you're doing the Trusted Alliance, probably doing a lot of mirroring with them, trying to get them to open up. I didn't know you majored in performing arts and philosophy, but now it all kind of makes sense, knowing where you are.
Channeling existential therapy.
Just trying to make sense of our universe, right? So yeah, I think it's definitely a through line that we think about those things as being very different, but ultimately they're kind of the same. Right? We're asking why any of this matters. Why do we treat people for depression? Why do we treat people for high blood pressure? It's not to really help people live longer, right? I mean, we spend so much time in Western medicine helping people live longer, right? We got amazing surgeries. We got amazing ventilators now. We got BiPAP, CPAP, all these amazing things that we can do to people, hopefully for people, but not always, right? But we do these things to people. And then the question is, does that really meet the need of the patient? Do we ask the patient, first of all, like, hey, you know what? You're 70, 80, 90, whatever years old. What do you want? It's the components of motivational interviewing. What do you care about? How motivated are you to make a change? And why does this change matter to you?
What is life without quality of life?
Happiness is a lot of people's floating idea of what happiness means, getting the car, getting the job, having a family. What they realize is that's not always happiness. Happiness is following your values. What do you want out of life? What do you want to grow to become? Not just necessarily a materialistic individual. That's really hard because a lot of people come in hoping there's a pill or a medication that will make them happy. Even when we get on medication, sometimes we realize what they've been seeking has been causing the dilemma of their depression. How do you manage that? It sounds like you have a lot of tools, but that's tough when they haven't reached their aha moment of, I'm kind of getting stuck.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I agree that a lot of times when people walk in, especially when they're relatively new to psychiatry, they think what they're looking for is happiness. I'm not sure that is really what people are looking for. We love happiness. Happiness is great, but we do have happiness in a pill. It's called ecstasy. You can just take some ecstasy and you will get this release of dopamine in your system and you will be happy, ecstatically happy for a period of time. The problem with drugs is that they don't last long enough, right? And they have lots of other consequences. I joke with my patients, and this sometimes gets me in trouble, but I say, listen, if you want to clean the kitchen at 3:00 in the morning, like cocaine is the drug to go to, right? It's like, and you are fabulous at that. You are doing all sorts of stuff. The problem is there are other consequences to that. So, and it's not sustainable if we're going to live for 5 minutes as opposed to 5 years, as opposed to 50 years. And trying to figure out what is important to that individual and realize that we're not trying to achieve happiness. Those are transient things in life. And anybody who's lived any amount of time, even 15-year-old kids, know they've been happy and they've been sad, and that's not sustainable, right? What we're trying to do is to find some sort of purpose and meaning as a thread throughout our lives, right? That takes perspective and maturity. Otherwise, we're just like, oh, we're going to get the right job, the right spouse, move to the right, have the right car. And then guess what? The finish line will be happiness. Right. And we will have arrived and then we'll live there for 40 years and then we'll die. Right. And it's a completely unrealistic expectation. I still think we're looking for the fantasy. We're looking for the fairy tale. It's only when we realize like, wow, life is hard. And if anything, that's my mantra. I tell people often, life sometimes sucks. Right. That doesn't make it a mental illness. We're dealing with difficulty and trial and tribulations in our life. We're not supposed to be happy all the time. Nor are we supposed to be sad all the time. It's one of the reasons why the DSM in all their criteria and timing and severity, at the end of every single one of them, they say, and this problem is significantly impairing of social and occupational and other areas of functioning, right?
Yeah. I mean, and also I think you have a good point. When I meet a patient or assess a patient, their functionality is completely different from the next patient I'm about to see. Every DSM-5 does not fit for every person. You really have to get to know what is their quality of life, what are their values, what is functional problems for this person versus another. So you're individualizing the treatment. It's a really good point.
A lot of times what I try and do is set expectations for people, because I think we do think that we're going to, get the pill, the surgery, or the cream, and then we're not going to have any problems anymore, or those problems are going to go away, right? Maybe somebody will come up with, like we've solved hepatitis C. I mean, maybe somebody will come up with the problem for depression or anxiety, or we'll understand it better than we are. It will be a scary day, I think, when we can do a lab test and say, oh, look, your depression level is 54. It should only be 20, right? Like, oh, well, this is what you need. And there's obviously continuing to be, and I think probably all the way going back to philosophy, Descartes, right? The idea that mind-body dualism, right? How we think about biochemistry, biochemical answers, right? Are we just a bag of chemicals walking around and we just need to find the right combination and then we'll be satisfied, we'll be happy? I think that I don't want to be grandiose, but I think there's an ineffable quality in humanity. And I think that we can't ignore that. And it's not just about finding the right balance of things. We have to have challenge. We have to also realize we're designed over the past several 100,000 years. Our world has changed dramatically, even in just 100 years, let alone 1,000 years or 100,000 years.
What made you take that shift from family medicine into psychiatry?
Yeah, it's a good question. I loved family medicine because it gave me the opportunity to see a lot of diversity and also see people through the span, which I really loved. I wasn't in family medicine for very long, but I would see people who were kids and then brought in their kids. I would see people, like, oh, okay, well, this is my great-grandchild. And that was great. I think that I had a really hard time talking in family practice about issues and things that should have been really important to the individual, but weren't important to them. Like, they're like, oh, well, look, your blood sugar is 250 and your blood pressure is 150 over 110. Like, you're going to have a stroke. Well, but I feel fine right now. Okay, like you're smoking 13, 15 cigarettes a day for the past 10 years. This is not sustainable. I know that your lung function's okay right now. You're 35, you're 40. You probably feel okay. It's living past that time. I joke, I say, you can do whatever you want to your body for the first 40 years. Living past that time, the problems arise. And you can't start at 40. You're just like, oh, now I'm going to clean up my act. No, you have to go back to 15 or 20 years earlier, trying to understand why those things were important. I saw psychiatry was all the stuff that I wanted, seeing people through the lifespan, was being able to have the diversity, but also only really focus on stuff that people cared about, right? Stuff that affected their quality of life, their purpose and meaning in life. We take the medical information we have and the scientific information, the new studies coming out, and we educate, especially PAs. We are patient educators at our core, I think. And our primary care background is essential. I would never give up my primary care foundation because I still feel like I practice in primary care. I still talk to people constantly about insulin, weight, and high blood pressure. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have good primary care providers or don't have any primary care providers. A lot of times I'm the only person they see, and I want to make sure that they're having quality as well as quantity of life. If this is not important to you, that's fine. I'm going to assess your motivation, but I'm going to continue to bring this up. I'm going to continue to bring up the fact that smoking or your obesity may not have too much to do with your depression or your anxiety, but I guarantee it has a lot to do with it, right? And we need to continue to talk about that, not be feeling embarrassed or ashamed, which is so much of what holds people back, right? To break that down, because ultimately honest conversations are the thing that moves us forward.
So what was your first psych job?
I started in psychiatry part-time. It was a gradual move. I did some part-time work at the state hospital for a couple of years, and I was still in family practice. And then I did a couple of days in an outpatient clinic from somebody I met at the state hospital. I actually worked at the state hospital in a family practice capacity. They were like, do this in family practice, right? And assess these people. We need medical clearance on this. And then eventually they're like, oh, well, why don't you come do a day or two of psychiatry here, at this outpatient clinic with me? And then eventually I made the move over 100% to psychiatry. Pretty much my entire career, even though sometimes I've been an employee, I've never been a full-time employee of any one place. I've always done like here, 2 days there, 3 days there, and move around. And that's, I'm trying to think, with the exception of family medicine, I actually have not been fully employed by anybody in 24 years. It's been a crazy experience, but very rewarding.
Tell me a little bit about your practice. I mean, you have your own clinic in your own office. And I love your experience of like you had contracts or odd jobs in psychiatry because you can then saw the whole breadth of it. People in the hospital, people in outpatient. So you saw where they came into service. So that brought a lot of knowledge as well as your family medicine background. What made you decide to open your own practice?
This is probably more appropriate even now than it was 20 years ago when I did it, which is that because psychiatry, at least because I see psychiatry as a quality of life field, like that's the thing we need to be focusing on. I realized that psychiatry and the way that I was working for a large outpatient clinic group. They had 3 clinics in town. We had probably 7 or 8 physicians in my group. I think I was the only PA there because this was 20 years ago. Maybe a nurse practitioner, but I'm not sure about that. Each place saw a lot and they had 10 therapists through each clinic too. It was a large place. A couple years later, they opened up a hospital right next door. So they were moving and grooving. They were also in the area that almost every other psych PA right now finds themselves in, which is, less time, more pressure, prior authorizations, phone calls, callbacks, staffing issues, administrative problems, all the things that we need to focus on. And I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time, but circling back on people's quality of life, another big focus of mine, and this is what I focused on in my doctorate degree, is on provider quality of life too, right? I mean, and we ignore ourselves. That's where all the burnout comes from. Impaired professional satisfaction, emotional exhaustion, and all that stuff. If we are emotionally exhausted, that is our job, right? Our job is to connect with people and make sure that we're meeting their needs, right? We're no different. We're just glorified, basically 7-Eleven employees for the most part. We are just there because of them, right? If we're not addressing those needs, then guess what? All that education we did, it's for nothing. Ultimately, we're perpetuating a system that is faulty. The nice thing about private practice is similar to my introduction into psychiatry. You can start it out on a part-time basis. And so that's what I did. In psychiatry for, about 4 years or so, I started like, okay, you know what? I can do some part-time work or I can do contract work. So I started doing some contract work with a therapist group who wanted a mental health prescriber on board to see some of their patients. I did that one day a week. A day in my own clinic. I was like, I can just rent out space one day a week at a therapist office and see my own patients. At that point, I didn't have any staff. I didn't have any other providers. And so that was great, right? It allowed me to kind of move in. And to this day, I still only do that part time and then do a lot of other things. It brought that flexibility that I've always really liked in practice. If we're not taking care of ourselves, and I saw that even 15, 20 years ago, that if I continued to be in the system, that I already saw myself not caring as much about my patients and just trying to get through the day, stressing out because I saw 17 people today and there's so much on my mind. Now I still have to do all these prior authorizations or these callbacks of, this medicine isn't working. I'm not going to get paid for that. And I'm going to have to do all this extra work after work. And this is still when everything was paper charts. We were constantly carting charts back and forth, trying to do all our notes at home and then bring them back in and all that stuff. So big deal.
I believe that healthy clinicians produce healthy patients. Sometimes when we get into practicing in the real world, there's a lot of burnout because of the systemic problems. It is a business, medicine. And I think that each provider has to figure out how to keep that joy or that fire in them. I do see a lot of PAs, even younger PAs, saying, I don't think I can do this. And I think that there are ways to figure out how to find that. I can do this and I do get joy because we did decide to go to PA school and it's not an easy thing to get in. and it's not easy to go through. And so I do see unfortunate young PAs already getting burnout early on. What would be your advice for a PA that just graduated, doesn't really know whether they should do psychiatry or not, but they do want to help patients? What would you say to them?
I think that, first of all, people need to decide what it is that they really enjoy about medicine. There are some people who they love to be in the OR. They love the procedures. They love that. I'm not one of those people, so I don't claim to know what that's like. But there are only so many fields of medicine where you can do that. I think the bigger thing is, no matter what you love, prioritizing your own health first, right? You need to make sure that you're okay. And I was talking to somebody, I remember it was a conference a couple of years ago, and we were joking, we'd both been in psychiatry for, I think he had been in psychiatry 16 or 17 years. We were talking about the fact that prior to PA school, when we were in college or even before college, that we would have been like ecstatic if we had said, oh, we're going to give you a job making $70,000 or $80,000. We'd be like, oh my God, that is fat. Oh my, I would just be set for the rest of my life. The reality is that just about every PA in the country could make $70,000 working like 3 days a week, right? And yet we don't do it. Why is it? We do 2 days a week. We don't do those things. And we think that because we have the ability to work 5 or 6 or 7 days a week, that's our responsibility. We feel like if our work says you must see 17, 18, 19, 20 people, that we better do that. Instead of saying, my limit is 14 and that's all I can see. And if you want to put me on a performance basis and I get the money for the money that I see, that's fine. In the end, I think we feel like, oh my God, we make 150 or 200,000. We got to do that. I got bills. PAs these days are coming out with medical school debt. They're coming out with $150,000 worth of medical debt. It's just astounding. So I'm not completely naive to the realities of the financial responsibilities that people have, but it's not a sprint, right? It's a long, long race. And if you're looking at 30 or 35 years, 40 years, sometimes of practice, you have to do things that are sustainable for you. And this too shall pass, right? I mean, I know that seems like a tired saying, but the reality is that we are so focused on what we're doing right now. And of course, young PAs coming out of school, they're 25, they're building families, they're getting married, they're having kids, building other relationships, moving around, they're figuring stuff out. Those are things that are normal, natural parts of the experience. So prioritize that in your life and realize that just because somebody's offering you, $160,000 coming out of your first job and, they say that, and it's no problem. You're on call every third day and every other weekend you're on call. We'll incentivize you, but it's about 20 patients, sometimes it's 23. Does that make sense for you? Maybe as a new grad, you don't know what that means, right? Obviously relying on other people to say, is it reasonable for me to see 20 or 23 patients in psychiatry if I worked 8 or 9 hours? But what kind of psychiatry do you want to practice? I used to have students with me, and I don't do it anymore because I do so much by video and I'm only working part-time in my private practice now. When I used to have a lot of students, and I took them for 10 years, it was a joke, but it was really true that the more experience I get, the longer it takes me with new patients. Because I want to spend more time with them. I know what questions I want to ask. I want to know more of their story. The reality is you build the trust at that initial visit, and then you can rely on that for the rest of your time with them, whether or not that be years or decades. Build that trust just like the initial friendships or relationships. You need to be able to know what it is that person's coming in for, and then you need to analyze that. I worked with a psychiatrist in town for a couple of years who was a machine. He'd see 30, 35 people a day. I'm sure he had 3 yachts. I'm sure he had his own airplane. But, the guy saw people in 5 or 10 minutes, and 25, 30% of everybody who came in was bipolar because they were having mood swings. And they certainly all had major depressive disorder. And the drug reps were on a steady stream, several a day, always breaking lunch. It really made me reflect. This is not about money. Money is nice. I wouldn't do this for no money. But this is about fundamentally finding meaning in my life. I feel purpose and meaning. And that's through helping others. Study after study shows that's where we get our meaning from, right? It doesn't matter how much money we have or what kind of yacht we have or car we drive. It's helping others, finding meaning through advancing stuff with them, right? Social connection. That's the secret.
I love your secret sauce, Jay. So you dive in with this background, in philosophy of performing arts and having the holistic perspective and wanting to connect with your patients and helping them find their meaning and purpose. And it goes back to you have done that self-discovery and meaning and purpose in your practice. And that's how you ended up in your own private practice. Sometimes the way I'm looking at it now is as a provider, we should be doing a 360 evaluation in our whole life. How am I doing? What are my kids saying? How is my partner saying? And instead of just thinking it's like a work 360, we need to reassess, take a moment to say, is this the direction I had intended to be at this point? I love that.
And if anything, I think the newer generation a little bit better at that.
Yeah.
30 have kind of capitalized on the fact that they don't want to work 50, 60 hours a week like their parents or grandparents did. That's not a value. And I think it's due to a variety of factors, right? I mean, it's a joke now, but the reality was 40, 50 years ago, we expected to work for a company for the rest of our life and for that company to take care of us. And that doesn't happen anymore. We don't live in the same house for 40 years. We don't work for the same company for our entire careers because companies don't treat people well. They are out for their bottom dollar and for their stockholders. And as a lot of those family businesses have kind of gone away or merged, we got 5, 10, 15 big companies that kind of huge swath of the American population are working for, whether it be healthcare companies or Walmart or Amazon or Apple. We're talking about these massive things. I love that idea, Mercedes, of doing a 360 in our own private lives, right? Because that's the most important thing. The work component is just one of those points. Maybe it's 10 or 15 or 20 degrees of that. What's the rest of it all around us? And how do we focus on that? And I think new grads often lose sight of that. And that's why people burn out at such a high rate in the first 5 years of their career. It hurts me deep inside when I see people online posting like, oh, I've been out in 3 years and I'm in psychiatry and I think I made the wrong choice. I feel burned out already and I don't care about my patients already. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so terrible. But that is not their fault. It's a system issue, right? These people are burned up in a system that unfortunately they're participating in, but it's because they think they have to, right? They have to see 20, 25 people a day, right? They have to do their own prior authorizations. They have to work without getting administrative support. And the reality is we do those things. Corporations like that capitalize the lack of experience, right? They capitalize, we can hire 2 PAs to do this kind of work, or we can get a nurse practitioner who we don't need to supervise, and they can do this kind of work, regardless of the quality of that work, whether patient outcomes are better, and regardless of whether or not the provider themselves is feeling content and purposeful in their own life, which makes their job sustainable.
So it sounds like you're saying to be proactive will burn out. It's about having your boundaries set and not just feeling like just because you can doesn't mean you should. I talk to a lot of PAs who want to work in psychiatry about those red flags when they're looking for jobs. It can be hard to break into psychiatry as a PA, depending on what state you're in and your personal background. That's one of the elements I'm always trying to help with my teaching. In addition, you shared that you always are working different part-time jobs. One of those jobs for you has also been teaching. Can you tell me a bit more about when you started to teach and in what capacity and where?
Yeah, sure. I think it's been 2.5 years now. I've been teaching at the University of Lynch in their Doctor of Medical Science degree. So they're one of the few programs in the country that has a psych-specific track for psychiatry. It's been great. I would love to see a diversity of more tracks come out for people. I did my doctorate in health science, A.T. Still University. So this is kind of where the DMSC kind of exploded. But, and so that was a frequent degree that PAs were getting 10, 15 years ago, the DHSC. I feel very fortunate to get the degree, but it was more research focused than it was clinical. Longer degree, it's 4.5 years. It taught me a lot, but it didn't focus, even though we did a lot of research on clinical topics, it wasn't a clinically focused degree. So that's really what these DMSCs, at least the one at Lynchburg, is kind of going for. So I teach the adult behavioral medicine courses. We have 2 courses, and I typically run 6 of those a year. Sometimes I'll teach 2 in a single semester, or sometimes I'll teach 1 in 1. This semester, I'm only teaching behavioral medicine 2. That'll be over in a couple of weeks, and then I get a quarter off, and then it's been great. I'm very fortunate. I'm new to education. I think it was one of the things that I felt was deficient in my PA education, my experience in the PA world. Well, I've done a lot of different things. I've been exposed to a lot of different things, but education is kind of a whole nother world. I've had friends, and you're really starting from scratch. Like, what is this whole syllabus thing? How do you talk to students and help them through this? It's different than dealing with patients, right? You're in a whole nother place. And so that's been great. I feel fortunate to have been with experienced educators who are taking me through this path, and it's been really exciting.
You've also been a speaker in many events. And so I'd like to take a moment and talk about that. One, the Psych Congress, PA Institute, is coming in December, and you're co-chairing with me. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about in that talk.
Yeah, those are going to be awesome. It's going to be a dolphin resort at Disney World. I mean, like everybody's like, you kidding me, man? I'm going to go see Mickey and the dolphins. It's going to be great. I'm actually doing 2 lectures there. One on AI in medicine and talking about the way that AI is transforming healthcare, certainly in mental health, how we're thinking about that, the glide path that we're on. I think some of the kind of fears and worries and some of the promise and opportunities. I'm doing that with Dipu Patel, who is the current president of PAEA, the Physician Assistant Educational Association. So she's been talking about AI for years, and I've always wanted to do a presentation with her and have kind of followed her path. When she gets a certification in AI, I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. Let me do that too. So I mean, like, oh, what are you doing? Let me figure that out, right?
Not at all competitive at all, Jay.
There's so much out there and there's so much noise, as we all know. So I'm like, oh, that sounds really cool. Let me do that one. So that's always been interesting. But the second one is something I've been focusing on for the past several years, which is lifestyle medicine, in particular, lifestyle psychiatry. Sometimes it's interesting. People don't know what that means. It gets confused with integrative medicine and
Functional medicine.
looking at supplements and things like that. But that medicine is a little more foundational into the things that we really care about. We look at lifestyle medicine as defined by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and it has 6 main pillars. So we're looking at regular physical activity, nutrition, social connections, restorative sleep, stress management is certainly a big thing. And then the final component is avoiding risky substances. Those main pillars, those things and lifestyle are kind of the foundations of the management of every disease. We talk about high blood pressure and diabetes and cancer and depression, right? And yet we kind of always like, okay, yeah, lifestyle, number 1. And then we kind of skip to number 4, like, well, what about those drugs? Let's find a good drug for that. You know what? Maybe you'll get bad and we'll be able to do bypass surgery on you. Won't that be great? And we put a vagus nerve stimulator in you. If we're really trying to help people, let's figure out the foundational research and knowledge that is inherent in those things. The food pyramid, right? More grain and bread and less sweets at the very top. We realized that it was probably the grain in the bread that was causing all our problems, right? So now we think about healthy plates. We're getting good research on inflammation and insulin and the effects of Mediterranean diets and whole plant-based food products. We're seeing the research on sleep. We're seeing it on social connection, right? I'm sure you guys all saw the report last year. The Surgeon General came out on the profound impacts on loneliness, right? These are the problem is we speak about them and like, oh, you should really exercise more, or, oh, you should really think about eating healthier, right? Everybody's heard them. I'm sure you heard them when you were 5 years old, right? Those are the things we need to talk about. We need to break down the barriers. And I hope that's what this lecture will really get into. Not just on the psychiatry side, but there's a huge amount of information. Now, in psychiatry, looking at inflammation, the role that diet plays and social connection and sleep, and saying, what do randomized placebo-controlled trials show us? What can we really do? I think we're still in our infancy as far as understanding that. Unfortunately, it's not funded well enough, but the reality is we are getting some information. And now there's some really good big studies that can show the impact. And it's not just like, oh, maybe this will help. Like, no, it will help, right?
Yeah.
Lisinopril is going to help and your metformin may help. This is not make-believe voodoo. 4 hours of sleep will fundamentally change your depression. So
I love that. I think there is definitely more education that needs to happen in lifestyle psychiatry to be at the forefront of our conversations as a psychiatric PA, just because of many PAs in psychiatry are going into those practices that are every 15 minutes and seeing several patients. At the end, are we really making better outcomes in their future? And I think that is where burnout comes in. As a PA, we can say, I want to see patients for 20 minutes because I know I'll get X, Y, and Z outcomes. Getting more into the research of how we can present lifestyle changes is so critical. For psychiatric PAs, we have that medical model. It's the perfect clinician to be able to integrate that into patient care. I'm excited about that talk.
It actually revolves around a lot of stuff that, you mentioned the American Psychiatric lectures that I gave you. A lot of those lectures were really around lifestyle topics, right? Insulin and its relationship to inflammation, how we think about depression, social determinants of mental health, how to do a nutritional assessment, how do we make subtle changes in people's lives, how do we leverage things like AI. These days, everybody's filling out their paperwork online. Nobody's working on a paper chart anymore. So how do we leverage those things? It means the things that we care about with those extra 5 minutes, you can say, okay, I'm going to talk to you about something that you're going to find meaningful because it's not external to you, like your Zoloft or Prozac. It's like, I'm going to give you this thing and it's going to make you better. It's something that you are doing and is fundamentally changing you for the better. This is your locus of control, right? And I think that is so important. And that means we need to get more information from people, need to make sure we're talking about those things and assess with people. It's not that people don't want to be healthier, but what does that mean for them? What they care about is, oh, I'm having pain all the time, or, oh, I feel really tired after 2:00 in the afternoon and my cognition goes way down. Let's talk to people about that. We know the majority of people coming into psychiatry are between 30 and 50. Why is that? After 30 years of life, bad living and the American lifestyle and the sad diet compiles up on us. We get all, and I think that we're not only doing a disservice to the patients, but we're doing it a service to ourselves. We need that information as well. We need to know about those things. And when we feel comfortable with that, we can express that to other people. There's a reason why all the substance and abuse counselors are previous addicts. It's like, there's a reason why those people go into those fields and talk to people about this. Why do so many people who do substance, even as PAs, are previous alcoholics, or, we talk about having a history of alcohol or substance abuse. Having that firsthand experience, right? If we had cancer, how much better would we be at talking to people about those things, right? If we dealt with high blood pressure or obesity in the past, how do we go about addressing that? And not that I'm proposing everybody needs to be obese or have cancer to be able to talk about those things, but I think that firsthand information gives us a credibility that we just can't fake. The lived experience, right? Same determinants of mental health, right? Making sure that the same cultural, ethnic, religious, whatever background in those areas, that speaks volumes for the person in front of us.
I just want to pivot briefly, because you being a presenter at the American Psychiatric Association, I think was a first-time event for a psychiatric PA. Is that correct? I'd love to hear more about how that unfolded, how your presentation was received, what it looked like in real time.
That's what I've been told, that I was the first time that a PA has presented there, which is actually probably not that surprising, because before I became the liaison to the APA, I actually took over from Phyllis Peterson, who was the liaison to that group. So we never had one before that. That's a really new position. I mean, it's now 9 years old, right? For the entire length of the PA profession, we have not had any formal connections with the APA, which is so
wild.
I didn't realize that until I became a liaison, but the APA is the oldest medical organization in the country. They were the first ones, which is scary to think what psychiatry looked like in the mid 1800s, but they were the first ones to establish themselves as a professional organization. And, before DSM-1 came out, right? And, we think about that, but PAs have been excluded from those organizations and from addressing mental health inequities throughout our country for the past 50 plus years, which is such a tragedy. I know when I heard that Phyllis helped establish that and became the first liaison, I was excited about that. I was incredibly blessed and fortunate to be in that second position. Really, it's been hard. I think my first year was 2019. I took over in June or July of that year. We all know what happened in March of 2020. Unfortunately, they didn't have a meeting that year, or rather the meeting was online. So it meant that I didn't get to connect with people. I'd only been to one APA meeting in the past 10 years ago with Kathy Judd when we were asked to talk about the PA profession. It was a funny experience. Then I went to the next three, but the relationship was broken at that point. There was not a lot of interest from APA standpoint. They were nice to us, cordial, and returned my messages most of the time. But for the most part, it was like, we'll call you if anything comes up. They wouldn't let us sit in on committees. They wouldn't let us be a part of their assembly, which is like our House of Delegates, even as an observer, much more secretive, much more cloistered. And that had been really hard. Largely, I just tried to make myself visible, as being the only PA there. In my first year, I think my first couple of years, I was the only PA there. Then in my last year, I encountered another PA, Lana from APA was there. And that was great. But it was just like, I'd get up in conversation after presentations and I'd say, hi, I'm Jay Summers. I'm a PA. I'd really like to know about this. I made sure the audience and walk up to the speakers and say, hi, I'm Jay Summers. I'm a PA. I really loved your presentation. Thank you so much. And made sure that the presidents were somewhat standoffish and they had a new one just like we do every year. It was interesting getting to the core of how I got to speak. In my last year, which was 2024, I ended up going back, they had buses to get to the hotels just like we do. I ended up sitting next to this woman and we ended up talking about lifestyle psychiatry. And I had gone to this lecture in London that was the International Association of Lifestyle Psychiatry Research. It happens every 2 years. And it basically brings together all the researchers throughout the world who do lifestyle psychiatry research. It was a lot of people from New Zealand and Australia and the United States. I had gone to one a couple of years earlier in Dallas in the United States, and the next one was in London. It was a topic that I was really interested in. We ended up talking about this, knowing a lot of the same people. And she's like, oh, that's great. She said, I told her, yeah, I'm a PA. And she said, I hope you're planning on coming to our caucus. I said, what caucus is that? She said, I'm the chair of the Lifestyle Psychiatry Caucus for the APA. I said, oh, that's great. I would love to attend your caucus. When is that? And she has been so fabulous. It's Gia Malo. She has written 3 books on lifestyle psychiatry and done so much work in that area. She has been such an advocate for me. I got involved in the Lifestyle Psychiatry Caucus. At the caucus meeting, they were going to start a study group for nutrition. They had various study groups, various things, but they were going to start one on nutrition and lifestyle psychiatry. I said, well, I'd love to be part of that. Every month, we met by Zoom and talked about articles on lifestyle psychiatry. From that group, we started talking about our deadline for submitting CME. We started to gather into groups about what topics would be interesting. I got on some of those groups and we submitted 3 CME lectures. I was interested in 3 CME lectures and all 3 of them got accepted. And I found out a couple months later, Jay, you're speaking in 3 different lectures at APA. Wow, this is awesome.
And it all started by sitting by someone and just talking about your interests and your passions and your purpose. Lifestyle medicine. It is on Amazon.
She just came out with that one. I think she had written another one. There are a couple that she's gone through. I know she just wrote, I swear some of them are like 5 or 6 years old. I never seemed to finish a book. There were a couple, and one was kind of her own journey. And this one is kind of more of a textbook on lifestyle psychiatry. It's a fascinating thing, but I've only gone through about 4 or 5 chapters of it. They ended up writing a green paper that was going to go in the APA journal. I actually think that I'm the only PA author on that thing. It hasn't been published yet, but I think next month it's supposed to be published in the APA journal.
Awesome.
All from this one exposure and then continuing to be persistent. It's like a Cinderella story, right? I tell people it had very little to do with who I am or what I've done, but just being at the right place at the right time and obviously being persistent, right?
I also think it is part of being who you are. You are open to new experience and talkative. Again, it goes back to meaning and purpose as a provider, as a human being. You decided never to give up on your passions and what you want to do in medicine. And I think that's what brought you to the perfect serendipitous situation by sitting by Gia Merlot, the leader of the caucus. Yeah. And I think because of you and how you present yourself and never give up, you have a place in psychiatry as a PA has put you on the radar for a lot of people. Just like Jessica and I, we saw what you do on social media.
Yeah, no, clearly you're right. I mean, the thing about right place, right time is that we're often at the right place at the wrong time. The only way we get to the right place at the right time if we continue to show up at the right place at the wrong time, put ourselves out there. And clearly, I've been doing this for a long time. It's like, okay, yeah, let's talk to people. Let's meet these people. Let's talk to leadership. Let's continue to bang my head against the brick wall with people that I've talked to. And eventually, there's an old slogan in high school, you put yourself out there and eventually you'll find your people. And I think that's true. High school, college, professional life, friends, spouses, and all sorts of things. In the end, we end up getting what we settle for. So don't settle what you don't deserve. And that means that you have to keep on going and continuing to do what you need to do. I feel blessed, but I do recognize the idea of persistence in my life. People see this and they see the PA degree and they're, oh, that wasn't easy. And then they see the doctorate and my leadership positions. I have a 16-year-old son and he's so much smarter than I am. He's struggling in high school, but taking advanced classes that I never could have taken. He's like, oh, you don't understand, Dad. You have a doctorate. And I tell people all the time, and certainly I tell my son this often, then it's not that I think I'm dumb, right? But I am not a particularly smart person. What I am is an incredibly persistent person, right? And I continue to do what I felt was necessary, and that's paid off in droves. I've continued to follow my own drummer, and it's gotten me to where I am. I'm not the leader of any national organization or working for the CDC, but it also has met my needs. In the end, I continue to do the things that I felt I was passionate about. And I think that if you continue to do that and you don't give up, those rewards eventually come. I think people just end up being like, oh, this is just too hard, or it's not going to happen. It's just like in depression, hopelessness is a profound thing, right?
Wow. This conversation has been so insightful. I feel like we dived real deep quickly, and I really appreciate that. Before we close, because I know we passed the hour, the takeaway of what I heard is, Jay Summers, I have learned a lot about your path and journey to become a psychiatric PA and now understand what it took, which is really kind of compassion, empathy, and grit that you have. I think that you have laid a path for a lot of new psychiatric PAs, and I hope this journey with Jessica and I on the podcast will continue to show that we are us people. Because I think as a community, as psychiatric PAs or PAs that do psychiatry and mental health in their practice, they realize you're not alone. And there's a reason why we do that. We do what we do. So thank you so much for talking to us. Any final thoughts, Jessica?
I just think we could probably have like 3 or 4 spin-off follow-up podcasts.
I actually
I think this is not the last time you're going to hear from us.
What I'd say, and I appreciate the fact that we're at time. As you can see from talking with me for an hour, I could go on and on. It's one of the problems in psychiatry. We get on our soapbox, start talking.
I love it.
And I will make my last plug for PA Institute. One of the things that I want to stress to PAs in all fields of medicine is that there is no differentiation between the brain and the body. We are one system. And the brain is a system that we don't understand very well, but that doesn't make it connected to the body, right? Ultimately, PA Institute and psychiatry in general is about treating the whole person. And high blood pressure and chronic pain, that bunion on your foot and cataracts, a brain and depression, they're all connected. We can't pretend that one is isolated from the other. I hope that some of what we're trying to do at PA Institute is reach out to primary care PAs, internal medicine PAs, pediatric PAs, OBGYN PAs, and all of those people who are seeing these people. We know that like 25, 30% of their patients have a psychiatric complaint, if not quite a bit more. That probably 25, 30% of them have actually a psychiatric diagnosis that could be made. But that, we need to be able to be helping these people. And if we're not addressing those things, it doesn't have to be about what's the fourth line agent for schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. We need to do a better job with being able to communicate with our patients about what's important to them, right? And psychiatry is an important part of that, just like treating their blood pressure. But who cares if we treat their blood pressure if we don't their quality of life, right? If we don't, most important to them. And I hope that you get a wide audience for your podcast, because I would love for people to recognize that this is not isolated, right? If you want to go into an exciting field that deals with all aspects of medicine, that is not just like, oh, I'm just going to be treating anxiety and depression all day long. No, you're going to be treating human beings. You're going to be treating quality of life. And this is going to be so exciting. It can be 100 different things. It's not what you think it is.
I love that. I have a hashtag and a t-shirt now that says all PAs are psych PAs, because you can't take the primary care family medicine model out of me. I will always be thinking with my patient as a holistic mind and body connection. And I love how you said that to me. And I was like, yep, all PAs are psych PAs. I believe you. I feel you. And we PAs have a great place in providing mental health care for the United States, for America. So thank you so much, Jay. And yes, I do think we should bring you back. I actually want your book list. I want to know what books you're reading. I'm a bookworm too.
I'm going to go down my reading chair and see if I can write down all the titles.
Take a picture and put it on your social media, because Jessica and I will stalk you. So we'll see who
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for picking me and stalking me. It's nice to know that I do have an Instagram account. I don't know how many followers. I think it might be slightly less than Beyonce, but appreciate anybody following me. I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jay. It's been amazing.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.